Well, hi, hello, and welcome to a masterclass in going agentic from vision to value across core life sciences commercial processes. Now, today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Salesforce and Accenture and produced by SmartBrief. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with SmartBrief, a future B2B company, and I'm really excited that I get to be here to be your moderator today because I think everybody who's here with us, probably aware of the fact life sciences really becomes kind of like a microcosm. It's a reflection of the world at large, especially when it comes to the pace of change. And in the world that we live in right now, we are probably tempted to toss out words like unprecedented and game changer. But I think a lot of us are really feeling like we're in a situation where game changer, it's really the whole game itself that's evolving right now. AI is not just another tool that we're putting in the toolbox. It is consistently and continually reshaping how patients and providers and enterprises are making decisions and are building trust, building connection. And we know that some of those engagement models built in the past are just not keeping up with the current tech capabilities as well as with our customer expectations. So I'm guessing that a lot of you out there with us today, you've joined the webinar because you are in the thick of this. You are maybe already implementing, maybe you're in an experimentation phase. You might be battling to get to that place where you can see the value in your pilot projects. Maybe some of you are wishing that you were at that place because you can't even get your pilots off the ground. And I get that. And it's very frustrating. There's a lot of pressure there to show that ROI. So that's what we're going to dig into today. We're not just going to talk about vision. We're not just going to talk high level, although we'll get into some really cool ideas. But we have two incredible experts here with us who are at the forefront of all of this change, all of this innovation. And these incredible speakers are going to share what they have seen, what they have learned from real delivery, real experience in order to help you get to that value right now, not someday in the future, not down the roadmap, although that too, but right now, how can you get to that place of value? So this is going to be a really interesting conversation. We have a lot to cover. I'm going to start out with just a few housekeeping points to kind of help get the show on the road and help you get the most out of our conversation today. What we're going to do is start out with a little bit of a tour of your audience console. So let's walk through the console together. Head on over to the right-hand side of your screen. There's three tabs there, and I want to start in the chat tab. And I see all of you guys getting on this. So we've got Jose, and we've got Teresa, and Joaquim, and Esther, and Pavel. Keep those highs and hellos coming. We want to hear from you. We want to hear where you are. I know right now the hot topic is weather. How cold are you? How's the snow where you are? I'm just going to assume you're all in snow. How's your snow? Let us know how your day is going. And as we go through our session together, this is going to be where you can all get to know each other. So if an idea resonates with you, if something is sounding like something you've tried or you'd like to try, please share that in the chat. You're sharing that with our community. You're sharing that with our speakers. We're seeing that in real time. So that's the chat tab there. If you go two little hops over to the Q&A tab, the Q&A tab is where you're going to ask questions directly of our two wonderful presenters. You can see on the screen here. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. That Q&A tab is going to be very important today because our speakers, not only are they going to be taking us through this really exciting conversation, they're also going to they're going to be in working double time here. They're also going to be answering questions on live chat. And we've got a team full of folks with us here that are in the backstage area, and they are ready to answer your questions on live chat. So we're going to get to as many questions as we can in our live conversation as well as our live chat. You have lots of ways to get answers today, so make sure you're getting those questions into the Q&A tab there. All right, that's chat, and then that's Q&A. Right in the middle, we've got the Docs tab, and this is a very important tab. It is absolutely chock full of cool resources and takeaways. You are going to want to spend some time exploring that Docs tab. What is really important about that, you hear so much information today, and there's a lot we're going to cover, and the Docs tab is how you can carry that forward in your day. That's how you get these actionable insights that are going to help jog your memory and bring this conversation into the real world as you walk out of the webinar today. So make sure you've explored and opened those links there. Chat, docs, Q&A. One more important thing that I want to mention, we do have closed captioning available for you on the webinar console. If you'd like to turn that on, that is down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You've got closed captioning. You can go full screen with your window there. So check out the controls there. If you have any tech issues today, hopefully that doesn't come up. Let's try to avoid those little gremlins. But if they get in your system, no problem. The first thing you're going to try is a browser refresh. You can also enable light mode on your webinar console. And last but not least, you can and post in the chat. And the wonderful Riley is here with us today. Riley is making sure that everything runs smoothly as we go through our day. So you can reach out to her on chat at any time. One last little piece of excitement for all of you. We do have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here live and present all the way through our webinar, and you do need to meet those Smart Brief terms and conditions. So if you're not sure what those are, they're available for you in the Docs tab. Go check them out. Stay tuned for that at the end of our webinar. All right. Whew, that was a lot of housekeeping. I gotta take a deep breath here. We got through that as quickly as I could because I am so excited to get into this conversation. And we have our wonderful speakers just waiting in the wings, ready to go. So let's get through some introductions and get them out here. I am very happy to introduce you all to our wonderful presenters here with us today. That's Kirsten Music, VP of Healthcare and Life Sciences Industries and Go-to-Market at Salesforce, as well as Lauren Shu, Managing Director, Life Sciences, CRM, Center of Excellence at Accenture. All right, let's get our wonderful speakers on out here and get things rolling. All right, well, here we are with our wonderful speakers with us today, and I'm so excited about this particular group, crew, coffee hangout we're about to have because, Kirsten, you are absolutely shaping the future of commercial engagement and championing the concept of the Agentic enterprise. Lauren, you are on the front lines every day. You are in it. You know just what it takes to go from pilot to real impact. That is quite the sort of lens and perspective that you are each bringing. Kirsten, Lauren, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Yeah, we're excited.
All right, well, let's start out with a very, very quick kind of why are we all here together? Why are we joining in the webinar? And kind of get into what is the story here between Salesforce and Accenture. I'm just really curious about this wonderful partnership. Kirsten, maybe I can ask you to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. I mean, fortunately, we get to work with Accenture a lot. I think they are great partners and not only helping us drive this agentic vision that we're bringing to life sciences, and particularly to our pharma customers right now, but I think they also keep us honest in making sure that that vision can become a tangible reality as we just think about pharma going from slower development cycles, really complex go-to-market structures around the globe, overcomplicated business processes over time. And a lot of pharma companies right now, their CEOs, I was just at JP Morgan, so they're putting out mandates about how do we grow without growing, right? Which means how do we do this faster? How do we rethink the way that we're going to market without necessarily adding hundreds and thousands of new headcount every time we launch a new drug? So we're trying to match that vision and those mandates with technology capabilities that allow us to do so. And Accenture helps us do that with our customers.
Thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, I mean, Salesforce is visionary with their product. Kind of got ahead of the curve in terms of the trust layer and agent and making those bets early. And as you mentioned, I'm on the front lines. So we have a lot of battle experience that we get to see across our clients and our portfolio. And so I think this harmony between execution and, visionary product gels really well together.
Well, I can already feel the positive energy, the connection, the excitement here. So I know we're going to have a really great chat. And I want to try something new here today. If you guys are willing to come along with me on a bit of an experiment, I want to borrow something from Pool, which is a game that I'm absolutely terrible at. This is not a place where I excel. But we're going to steal from sort of calling your shot. So here's what I'm going to ask Lauren and Kirsten. Can I ask you guys to call your shot? What is one thing that you think at the end of our webinar, the audience, the folks here with us today are going to walk away understanding, being ready to take action on? What is that one thing that they're going to be pumped up and ready to take to their organization? Lauren, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I guess I'll say one, it's think outside of your comfort zone, think broadly for the holistic value. It's easy to kind of, start in your box. And two, this isn't just about your business, but it's about yourself. So upskill yourself and really own your human and AI, new true self, because that's the future.
I like that.
I love those. I think the other piece for me that I would just add to that on calling the shot is I have a necklace on that says progress over perfection, right? And I think for so long in this market, we have to have perfection. But I think we are facing a completely new era, as we'll talk about. And And that requires us to be in a learning mindset, to what Lauren's saying, really question what do we know versus what don't we know, and to get really curious. But I really hope what you all take out of this today too is very tangible things that you can go do differently in not only your leadership progression and career, but also with your team. So those are kind of my two shots I'd like to call.
I love it. This is great. This is going to be really fun. I haven't tried this before. So Lauren and I, before we started our webinar today, we're talking about our Post-it notes. So I have a Post-it note for each of you. I'm just going to put those aside and we'll come back to those, or come back and see at the end how we did. We're going to see if we hit those goals. So audience, stay with us and we'll see if we can get you that insight and info. But that's, actually where you guys were kind of digging into. I actually would love to get your thoughts on how, every time we get in a conversation about AI, or really just the world at large, which, let's be honest, involves AI these days, the word sort of change, unprecedented times, unprecedented change. These are big words, big ideas, big concepts. And I'm going to ask you guys to maybe try to bring that to a more realistic standpoint, like, getting sort of beyond what could be perceived as a buzz. I think it's true, but that doesn't mean that we're not using it a lot. So let's get into the reality. What do life science leaders need to know about the actual world that we live in right now? And Kirsten, maybe I can ask you to sort of help us set the stage there.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I talk a lot with industry leaders about is the fact that this is happening whether you are bringing it to them in your enterprise technology or not, right? Whether we like it or not, this is embedded in the way that we show up as consumers. This is embedded in the way I'm a mom, right? I do a lot of AI for those types of things too. People are planning trips. And let's be honest, my husband's a medical oncologist, and I talked to a patient the other day, not one of his, but she talked about the fact that providers are time constrained. So she's turning to ChatGPT to get a bunch of questions to her answers in such a way that really makes it even more difficult for the providers, for example, to know, like, what are their incoming assumptions about what's happening because of what were they able to find on ChatGPT, right? Now, we've always had Dr. Google. We've always had these different types of moments, right? I think what's different about it now is that we can do a couple of things in this industry that we could never do before. We can reshape ecosystems, the way that we connect providers, patients, around kind of access, around truly how therapies need to be delivered and market, if it's in specialty or rare disease, versus, really thinking about the kind of mass market opportunities and how do we actually get more access to patients. I also think the technology is caught up in such a way, and I've been watching a lot of what the head of OpenAI has been saying and everything else. Like, we're at the point where AI is at the same level of cognition as a lot of humans, right? And so I think that's a radically different thing than the technology we've seen of the past. And last but not least, the thing that AI gives us that no other technology really has, it's the first thing that goes against our own human constraints, which is time, right? We operate in 24/7. AI, with its compute power, does not have to operate by those same time continuum. And so it radically changes the way that we think about work and what that looks like. Lauren, I'd love to hear what you think, though.
Yeah, 100% agree with all of that. I mean, guilty. I've definitely gotten a provider report with some jargon, and I was like, I don't know what this means. Is this serious? They didn't call me back about my report, and I've plugged it in, and it told me not to worry. But anyway, instead of me like waiting on hold at the doctor's office, I've definitely done that. Just to echo that, and I think people are aware, obviously, like you alluded to it too, Jess. Obviously, we live in an AI world. Consumers have these liquid expectations of these experiences because it's bombarding us everywhere, and our shopping, our personal experiences as parents, if you're, things like that. I think where we're really trying to get LS leaders to understand is, along with Gen AI, and I know they know this, but the market's getting increasingly more competitive, right? Like, you have more drugs entering the market as well. When there was maybe 1 to 2 brands that competed, now there's potentially 5 to 7, and they're getting more niche, depending on the various therapeutics. And so how do you set yourself apart? And if things in the market are relatively equal in terms of price and efficacy and things like that, what it will come down to is the patient's experience and the customer experience. And so that personalization has to come through Gen AI now. You will not compete if you don't leverage a tool like this to give great customer service. So how do you do that?
As a, really quickly on that point, Lauren, just to build, I think the other thing that's different is certainly how this technology is being developed and deployed is at a pace that like we've never really seen before. So I think to your point too, those that aren't getting started today around some of this, particularly on that engagement layer, that experience layer, who knows where we're going to be in 18 months, just given how fast some of this is going, right? Yeah. And I think there really is an opportunity cost for going slow at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give like a personal experience. Like I'm very makeup illiterate, and like I do not like walking into Sephora. It is very intimidating. There's like teenagers that know way more about skincare than I do. And I have, well, in general, I think Asia and Japan have a reputation for great customer service, but Shiseido has like an amazing customer service on their platform. You go there, it remembers, maybe it's a little creepy, but I think it's also great. It remembers what you're browsing, your skin type. It helps match you in what I felt like was a pretty accurate way to match my skin tone, everything like that. And so I had a great experience. I've never purchased Shiseido in my life, and after that experience, I'm a very loyal customer. And the makeup industry is flooded. So I think that's like a great example of there's tons of competitors in the market, price competitive, probably efficacy, but how do they hook you? And I think everyone, that can be applied across the board. So that's my real world takeaway from that.
That's a great, I need to do that.
I know.
What do you think it was about that experience when you reflect on that, but maybe extrapolating out, like in your mind, was that they gave you a personalized experience, that they gave you information you couldn't get anywhere?
And if you have questions that connect you immediately with an expert, so you don't have to start with like a salesperson. You can kind of like explore, which, in Sephora, if someone comes up and talks to me, I'm like, don't talk to me. I don't know if I want to like buy something, and now I feel pressured or guilty. So you can explore on your own. You can try to figure out which lane you want to go to. You can try to figure out on your own. But if they know you're struggling, they'll pair you with someone, and then it's probably the training that this human does. This is why human and AI is so important, right? Where they can take it to that next level to help you finish. And, it didn't feel at all salesy to me. It just felt like service.
I like that. Kirsten, do you have a great service example that springs to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton, and, kind of working at Salesforce, we hear all these great stories. So I tend to go test all of the, great stories that we put out in market and think about that. But I think one of the big stories for me is really, we just came out with Slackbot, which is a terrible name. So apologies to all the marketing people in the Slack world, but it kind of undermines like what actually that technology can do. And I think for me, I've been a little bit skeptical of how much AI actually makes me productive versus not. And to Lauren's point, I have really spent the last 2 years trying to upskill and like really learning how AI works, quite frankly. And I think Slackbot is the first one that's like a chief of staff in my pocket, right? Like it helped me write all of my team's, annual performance reviews based off of all of their interactions in Slack. And to Lauren's point, like, yeah, it's a little creepy because like Slack's always listening now, but it's also super helpful because I get to see things and interaction points and intersections that like, I'm not part of every conversation that they're in. I don't know how they're showing up across all of the networks that they need to work across within Salesforce, right? And so Slackbot actually gave me a lot of really interesting pointers that allowed me to even write better feedback for my team and focus on, okay, here's really what we need to work on next year in a much more, I think, unbiased way from like the interaction points that I have. So that's kind of been my new recent experience that I was very impressed despite the fact of some skepticism going in. So
I like that you have a chief of staff in your pocket. But Lauren, coming back to you, one of the things I was thinking about is that sort of need that you talked about personalization and what I need and want in one moment. You wanted the information and you needed that for your makeup, but maybe when you're buying a car, I don't know why that's the next thing that comes to my mind, you would have a different expectation and need of what that experience is. Is that what you were getting at when you said liquid expectations? Is it the change in what a good experience is, or where does that come in?
I think it's like leaving with, that was a great experience and it met me where I was, right? So like so many times through like, when we've been doing these programs, omni-channel, et cetera, we've been saying omni-channel for like decades. I think we're like finally to the point where we can actually be omni-channel, but we kept getting complaints from customers because they didn't want to engage necessarily on the webpage or the chatbot or et cetera. And we kept saying, we got to meet them where they are. We got to meet them where they are. And I think this is the first time that we're actually probably able to do that with some finesse that did not exist before. And so it will, to your point, look different in every industry scenario, et cetera. But tailoring that's people will leave and say, I had such a great experience there. Like, why can't I get the same great experience at XYZ?
I think the other thing, Jess, and Lauren and I have worked on a similar customer together around some of these liquid expectations. I think we've underestimated how much AI today, particularly in healthcare and life sciences, those experiences, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever you end up using, right? This question answer format and that expectation of like being able to get much more robust answers at your fingertips, or to be able to determine quickly if you trust that answer or not, and how to then rewrite the prompt to get to a better answer. That has taken over our interaction, like the way that we're engaging with technology, I think way faster than most of us expected, right? And I think those types of liquid expectations too, we're still delivering, and some of the contemporaries and legacy SaaS products in the market are still delivering like outdated enterprise experiences with like tabs and like, things that you have to drag and drop, right? As opposed to, let me have a conversation with this technology in a way that we're having this conversation now as a set of three humans, right? And I think that those types of liquid expectations, those have moved a lot faster than I think the market expected it to.
Kirsten, that's actually a great. I'd like to keep talking about some of the tools that are a part of this conversation, and of course, when we're building, personalized experiences, when we're building an experience for our customers, our clients, I think for most of us, the bread and butter of that is a CRM. And our CRM is how we track everything we know about these individuals that we're working with. And I think we've seen some evolution there, and especially with Agentic AI. So Kirsten, I'm wondering if I can ask you to kind of explore that a little bit, maybe if you have any examples that you've seen of how the role of CRMs has changed, and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. Obviously, anyone can look at the headlines and people claiming SaaS is dead. Lauren and I went back and forth on this before we started for the webinar too, right? And I think to some degree, I think SaaS has to evolve, right? There are still deeply embedded ways of working that doing it agentically or even with generative AI just will never ever work, or will be too cost prohibitive from the compute power, right? There are some things that we will always need to have some degree of determinism in. And I think CRM as a deep system of record that now can become a more important system of intelligence for doing some of that really deep and hard work, if you will, around workflows, around orchestration, around data organization, around harmonizing key components. So CRM as an application, I think maybe has gone away, but CRM as that kind of deterministic piece when you need it and you need that same answer every single time. Particularly in life sciences, right? Like we had a couple customers as we've been going through our evaluations this past year that was like, I need to have this answer. If someone's calling in with a side effect of depression, we have to be able to answer the same way every single time. I cannot rely on generative AI to slightly change the wording in that, right? Because has regulatory implications, it has audit implications, it has all these other challenges. And so I think that degree of workflow determinism, of being able to really, to Lauren's point earlier, meeting not only our customers and our consumers where they are, but meeting the needs of what our business has to deliver from a trust standpoint, an integrity standpoint, a precision standpoint, that's really going to become, I think, the evolving role of CRM and really of platforms like Salesforce that have these technical capabilities, not just at the application layer, but much deeper to the data harmonization layer, and then all the way back up to very flexible end user experiences, dynamic ways of working, right? I think that's kind of where CRM evolves to over time in this agentic world. Lauren, but would love to hear your point, because I know you and I have debated this a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think there's some leveling up that needs to be done with SaaS. But I think, you guys are doing it. It's not like you're not trying to put your money where your mouth is. like it's been agents, Agentic Enterprise. Anyone who went to Dreamforce, I think you could have played a great drinking game there for how many times you heard agents and Agentic Enterprise.
Yeah, we still do.
Good
We
idea.
have agent bingo now. Yeah. So
just keep your bingo card out.
yes.
But yeah, I do think part of this is people need to understand too that this isn't just like a tech upgrade, but it's a broader operating model shift. And you can't just set it to, you can't just set it and forget it. It will continuously need to be trained. You'll have to figure out how you want to evaluate these agents and what metrics that they're your new digital worker, right? You have to treat them like your workforce. So they will need continuous training along with, in parallel to your CRM system or whatever that looks like. You will need to kind of have new metrics in place for them and keep moving that target as it gets smarter, just like you do for your human labor component. And it needs to be kind of like broader as part of everything. So it's not just CRM, although CRM is key. It truly will be a broader operating model change and influence and, be everywhere. I almost said in factor invade, but that felt wrong. So I'll stick with influence.
Yeah. Well, I think, Lauren, to your point too, I think the other big piece of like, we all know how CRM applications work from one experience or another, or we don't because like our team just pulls the report and sends us up to us for a board deck, right? I think what's changed now is like, we all have to really understand how these agentic experiences work. And it touches all levels of the organization in a way that some of these SaaS applications never did.
Right.
I think the other big piece to what Lauren was saying, and this is something I've had to force myself, right? Like the expectations of my leadership is that I am 2x or 3x more productive because of these tools, which doesn't mean I have less work, right? It actually means I have way more work because let's be honest, the tools have kind of been catching up to where we can operate at. And so I've had to really think about how do I work differently? Where do I want to use agentic capabilities to do this? How do I force myself to learn how to do that versus where do I want to rely on my team to think differently about this versus like, where am I doing this the old way and just like taking out a piece of paper, taking out a bunch of stickies and putting them on a whiteboard and like, I have to do real original thinking here. And I know I'm not going to get that from AI. Right. And so that challenge, that leadership challenge of like, when should I apply this technology because of what it's good at versus not really requires us to think differently about it too.
Yep. Totally
I
agree.
literally have a whiteboard covered in Post-it notes right here. So.
I mean, sometimes, for original thinking or like really like when you're looking at a problem and you're like, you got to do it.
I need it. I need that tangible feel. Yeah. Okay. Both of you are bringing up great points. I want to do a quick backtrack to Lauren. I want to make sure I understand this. I think that for a long time, we've sort of treated AI as its own, like you have AI projects, you have AI people. Would you still keep it that way, or are you seeing that AI is just, like when we combined, DevSecOps and all of a sudden we had one team that did all? Is AI just in everything now?
Yeah. I mean, yes, short answer, yes. But I think like a good example of like what we heard this before, like why you have to think holistically. And this doesn't even apply to AI, but it's just something I think that people don't think about, but then you can put the AI layer on top. I was talking to a client and they're like, you know what? Our company objectives have this one goal for the entire company. We all have to hit this. But our salespeople have certain KPIs and our service people have KPIs and our marketers have KPIs. We also have this bigger goal, but all our KPIs conflict with one another and sometimes, right? And so yet we're measured on these performance of our KPIs and still have to then together hit this broader objective. And like our firm isn't, or our leadership isn't thinking holistically on what should the interlock be and these KPIs, as us, as, colleagues together to hit this goal. And I think the same thing happens for these AI projects. We call it agent sprawl. That's like another buzzword you'll probably hear. But these projects have been happening in silos. And so because you want to start small, you want to test it, you want to meet with that BU, you want to make sure you get the value because that's how you get the funding, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is sometimes they have similar use cases. And so then when they get together or you have interlock or these groups work together or they have crossover because they will, there's sometimes conflicts, or it's redundant work, or, you know, it's I don't want to say a waste of dollars, but the dollars could have been used more efficiently had maybe there been a broader view. Some of this will happen naturally as companies go on their AI maturity curve evolution. But as much as we can try to broaden the aperture of our lens holistically, you know, as companies, as people, you know, for our clients, et cetera, and think a bit broader, I think the more we can try to avoid doing some of these things repetitively.
Yeah. I also think, Lauren, you said it better earlier too, in the sense that like, we can't just set it and forget it. Like if we go from this being like an application that we just stand up and implement and then like let it run and see how it goes, right? Versus like what I was talking about with Slackbot a little bit, where I'm like, okay, can this first help me become a better people manager, right? Then what are the next tasks I can give it so it actually can become like a better chief of staff for me? Like if we have more of that mindset to some of these projects too, like how do we just get our sales teams more productive, right? How do we give them 2 hours back, 3 hours back? That's where we're seeing a lot of these places start. And then eventually being like, okay, how do we fill those 2 or 3 hours with, so that we have revenue uplift, right? Now you're actually getting into like where this digital agent is becoming an assistive sales rep or assistant sales coach, right? So I think that it's that progression that Lauren was talking about earlier too, as we think about just digital workers versus the way we used to run applications is definitely a mindset shift that we're seeing as the division between those that are getting it right and those that are struggling.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to keep going on that point, actually, though, Kirsten, because I think that's a really interesting thing for folks in our audience is, and I'm seeing some questions come in around this from leaders that are managing that mix of AI and people, and that's not an easy thing, and that's a relatively new on the level and the scale that we're discussing. You know, you were talking earlier about the expectations of being 2 times, busier, 3 times busier, more productive. You know, what advice would you give to some of the folks in the audience who are asking how they can manage this team? How can Salesforce help them out?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. So I think it comes down to a lot of the new, and as Lauren said, we've been on this journey trying to learn how to make agentic enterprises, including ourselves as an agentic enterprise over the last couple of years. But I think that the notion of understanding like traceability and getting curious around how are these things actually working, right? Can we watch where people are getting stuck talking to this agent or where we need to train them? And it would be the same approach that we would take to like onboarding a new intern or onboarding a new employee. We would have 30, 60, 90-day plans and we would check in on them. That's not really how we deploy software usually, right? And so I think having very clear goals, just like we're onboarding a new employee, we're onboarding a new digital worker, and how are they doing over 30, 60, 90 days? How do we trace that in some of the new experiences like that we've built at Salesforce so that you can actually start to see where they're getting stuck or where they're having dips in accuracy or where they're, you know, a lot of what we've talked about is latency, right? Because of the types of data sources that we're bringing in life sciences, they're huge. So how do we actually get through some of those types of expectations with this, just like you would with a new worker? I don't know, Lauren, I think you have other great examples too, but.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like a lot of the projects we're seeing now, I don't think they've gotten to that stage where they can train and check in, but we're trying to encourage them, like, make sure you don't, like, more tactically in your project funding and your support model and your goals and your KPIs, you think about that broader. I think it's also that in terms of like the training piece, MIT and their workers. So I think some companies are doing like very basic like training on AI, like, you know, what is it? How do you prompt? Like things like that, which is great. That has to be done, the foundational. But I think the next step up is realizing that, yes, you'll have digital workers, but then to your point of your chief of staff, you also have it enhance your work. Your needs are different than my needs. Your strengths are different than my strengths. And so how we're going to leverage AI to make ourselves the most efficient is different. And so maybe what we need in terms of this AI support model or the prompts or the data will also different, even if we're similar parts of the firm or similar roles or whatnot. And so there's another nuance to that where MIT published this very interesting study that depending on a person's personality, the type of AI they engaged with had material differences. They did by men and women. And so they had different, you know, for men, they liked this, I'm generalizing, okay, for the audience. But, you know, I think women and men tended to prefer a different type of response and AI agent that they worked with, and had material differences in their outcomes from one another. Again, generalizing. And so that, I thought that was really interesting, because I don't think we're not to that AI maturity curve, if you will, to start thinking about those nuances yet. For then how we make sure our humans are the most productive that they can be, based on their strengths and weaknesses, based on their personality, right? We do a lot of team building with like SWOT analysis and your personality test with humans, but like, what does that look like now with also digital workers, right? That's kind of like the next thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective. Lauren, the one thing I wanted to bring up too, so on this mutual customer that we're working on, I think one thing in that piece too, that we're kind of assuming, I think a lot of leaders assume that all people interact with AI the same, right? And when we did a pilot with a customer, and we got this really pretty complex agent built in like 6 weeks up and running, but like we missed a little bit of like the fact that some of the cohort were very data driven and really wanted to use it to like be more analytical, and other people just wanted it to answer questions. Yeah. Right. And like those are actually two very different use cases. And to Lauren's point, like those would actually maybe be very different digital workers in the long run, right? But because and all of us are learning this, there are no precedent for a lot of these types of ways to go to market. And so I think there's some of those types of things that we have yet to see in terms of, maybe there's new types of DISC profiles in the future, Strength Finder, because now we actually have to incorporate all of these new ways of working into it as well.
Yeah.
Well, and you're hitting, I think, a really important point there, that we haven't been through this before. So it's not that there's a well-worn path here necessarily. And, Lauren, maybe if I can ask you to kind of keep going, you were giving us some examples. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on getting into that. We started and we said we want to get everyone to a place where they're feeling value, right? So how are we actually taking that step from this is the mindset and the things we're thinking about into that value phase?
Yeah, I think there's a couple important building blocks. Maybe I'll start with the value one. I think a big part of this, as we've been talking about, is this you'll hear enterprise, we said it's a holistic shift, et cetera. That means you have to rethink your processes. In order to do that, it has to come from the top down, right? This has to come from your leads to truly reinvent what you're doing and how you're doing it. This can't just be adding an agent, as my sidekick, to like have fundamental change. So I think that's building block number one, is you have to really like understand and want and take a look at reinventing your processes holistically. And that has to come from a cultural shift and an objective from top down. So I think that's item one. I think item two is more tactical on what we like to call agentic digital core. And so there are some things like tenets of having a clean digital core, if you will, or the tenets of setting up a strong data and AI holistic backbone that can scale with you as the technology changes. The technology for AI last year is different than this year. So you, again, with the set it and forget it kind of theme here, the way you set up your digital core and your backbone has to be in a way that can scale. And no, we can't predict everything, right? We're not going to be able to predict everything, but can we set it up in a way that can scale with the changes that are yet to come? And you have to do that as a digital core, but also your operating model. Your people have to be able to scale as the technology changes to be able to handle it, to also support this change in digital core. So that's the second thing. So the first one was top-down value, holistic change. The second one's agentic digital core. And then, I think the third one, which I've kind of touched on a couple places, and Kirsten has too, is this human and AI performance frontier and what that looks like for your talent and your labor force, and making sure, because with any great change is people, process, tech, right? So you have your process, you have your tech, this is your people. And so what does that look like in complementing your labor force with this digital worker? I think those are the three things.
Yeah, those are pretty important things. Kirsten, I just want to pause. Did you have anything that you would add to that as well?
No, I think Lauren covered it pretty well. I think the only other thing that we talked about a little bit too is, I think one thing for leaders, I think we have to stay committed to learning this, right? Like, I think the people, process, technology are all really important pieces once a decision's made.
Yeah.
I think too often we just are saying this failed because we have that set it and forget it mentality, or that like we want perfection instead of progress, instead of like really focusing on it as like, what are the learning horizons that we need to accomplish? And then what are those outcomes at each learning horizon that allows us to get to the next one, right? And so it's a little bit more of an iterative process. And I think we all care to be, especially in life sciences, where we need to have a lot more determinism and a lot more perfection up front, and a lot more, we use a lot of science and data and all those types of things. But even the scientific method has a lot of experimentation in it. And I think we need to embrace some of those principles safely in order to really understand what AI can do for us here.
I think both of you are really hitting on something that's jumping out for me, which is just sort of the dynamic approach. And when we say don't set and forget it, I think that's both an action step and a mindset. And you guys have kind of walked us through that. In you need to have evolving processes, but that starts from leadership really stepping into that dynamic mindset and kind of rolling with things. And Lauren, I'd love to kind of leave that with you for a second and see if we could get some examples of, from your role on the front lines, how should leaders, folks that are here with us in the audience today, be thinking about some of that dynamic mindset, kind of, building those skills that they're going to need as individuals, that they're going to need as an organization, in order to not just ride the wave, but really hit that success metric in the world we live in?
Yeah, great question. There's, I guess, two references I'll call out. Like, one, we did a exercise where we had plotted not every single, but a large swath of the roles in the life science industry. Everything from like a marketer and a content creator to, your back end, your scientists and your chemical engineers, et cetera. And we plotted them on a graph in terms of how many would be complemented by AI versus potentially, more consumed, the skill set would be more replaced by AI, and how those dots plotted. And then we also layered on what is the value of that worker, right? And the nuance of those skills, because I think part of this, when leads need to think about their AI strategy, is like, what value am I trying to extract from this agentic enterprise layer? And, where do I kind of focus my energy, right? Because I think it can be very overwhelming, but doing an exercise like this makes it a little more bite-sized and tangible. So, where can I put some of my chips around my processes or my talent or my skills? So that's one thing. We plotted these things to say, based on this, and I'm not saying like role reduction, but I'm just saying, where can I get more value bang for my buck? The other thing that Wharton actually came out with was a skills, like an underrepresented skills list. I think we'll publish that report after this. But it really did talk about kind of, complementing this exercise we did with the dot graph, but it does all industries. What skills are highly valued still, and which ones will be more replaced, if you will, or AI will have a more of a say in those skill sets. And so where should you focus on upskilling yourself? And I think we go through this with every big revolution, right? The Industrial Revolution, right? The age of the internet. So this is the next one. So I'm sure it seems very scary, but I think these resources are out there for leads to help digest and understand where to focus, as well as for us, like individuals like ourselves. So it's exciting too.
We have that in our handouts tab, in the docs tab right now. So if anyone wants to read a little bit more, head on over to the docs tab and find that. Lauren, any hot headlines or highlights you'd want to share from that?
From the skills thing?
Yeah.
I think the ones that we thought were that we're all using our daily lives, like the content, the emails, the leadership kind of more takes, that's kind of everyone's supplementing a little bit. But I think where we're still have value is like the critical thinking and the industry deep vertical expertise and execution experience. Because yes, you can Google and you can ask the LLM and it will scour the internet and pull back across a bunch of research. but it's one thing to then critically think and apply that. And it's another thing to actually have the execution experience to take it to the next level. And that's where you still need humans. So a human in the AI, I think, is still kind of, the perfect combination in that regard.
That's what
oh, sorry. I was gonna say I have to look at that Wharton skill list. So I'll go in the docs after this. But I think the other big piece that I've been seeing a lot, and this is just more of like a Kirsten Music hypothesis, not a Wharton hypothesis or an Accenture one, but I personally think that we need to get a lot better at systems thinking, because I actually think the way that we build ecosystems, where we how we disaggregate a business process, what should be agentic, what shouldn't be agentic, kind of that being able to have like a city planning view, right, is going to be something that's much more important. And it's not so much about us being able to like move people in and out of a city, but it is at the level of like, what data sources need to be connected? How are they flowing for these different roles to work together, for these agents to interact within those roles? Certainly that's something I think a lot about, is like, what are these new systems that I have to be comfortable with and understanding and maintaining and now building in order to really make sure all of this goes. And I think, I was a chief marketing officer in my past life, and I think I never really had to understand the data. Like, I kind of knew what answers I needed or the story I wanted to tell, and then I relied on my marketing ops team to go figure all that out, right? I think that's changed a lot, right? Now you have to understand your data sources as much as you understand how to execute a campaign, because you have to be able to figure out how those things come together in the future, right? And I think that notion of systems thinking is something that will be a really highly valued skill set in the future too.
I like that systems thinking. And what I'm hearing from you guys over and over again is that layering of sort of the human and the AI in multiple ways, in lots of different nuance to that. And of course, coming back to the human in every case, coming back to the person on the other end of the experience and creating, a lot of what we talked about, I think, with technology is efficiency, but a huge element with AI is connection and engagement. And so it's kind of neat to see those two things really coexisting in this conversation. And I hate to say this, we're getting close to the end of our session here, which is crazy how fast this has gone by. So we're gonna have to start to bring things to a close. But I'm gonna ask you guys one. I might Minnesota goodbye you, which is something I'm very good at. I might ask you a question and then sneak in a bunch of bonus questions, but I'm going to ask you one more question officially here. And what I want to do is kind of circle back. We're not going back necessarily to where we called our shots yet, but just where we started our conversation at the start today was getting into this kind of unprecedented change and wild times that we're in right now. We've gone through some of the pieces of what that actually means. With upheaval, with innovation, the pros and cons, there's also a lot of opportunity, right? So I'm wondering, if we've got our agile and dynamic mindset, we've set those foundations and those building blocks that we've walked through today, what is actually that next, what's the spark that really brings that fire forward? What's that next thing that happens? And Kirsten, maybe I can kick it to you to start us out.
Yeah, I mean, my answer might seem trite or too simple, but like, honestly, you just have to get started. Yeah. You know what I mean? And yeah, and I think get started with like almost a time goal in mind, right? Like one I brought this up before, but some of our hardest customers are like, can you do this in 8 weeks or less? Can you do this in a day and a half? Right. And that means that we are already starting with that like progress over perfection mindset, because we know in a day and a half, it's not going to be a perfect outcome, but we've already started to learn and improve. Right. And I think that's kind of the generative nature of a lot of these AI capabilities in and of itself, is like, let's start learning and let's improve rapidly. So again, kind of a simple answer, but I think the people that have been most successful are the ones that have just gotten started and started learning. And some of them, Lauren brought up before, like some of them aren't maybe the most efficiently used dollars, but they're dollars that allow us to be much more efficient in the future. And that's kind of the way that we're seeing success happen.
And I shouldn't say that maybe, because they learned from them. So they were dollars that went towards learning and experience. But I know that the business case doesn't always validate that.
Play out. I think, and I think there's like an MIT study that talked about that too. But I think just getting started, we can't be afraid of the failure, because like a lot of these are failing. We have to be able to like figure out how to learn and get value out of them regardless.
Yeah.
I like it. Lauren, do you have, is that your spark? Just action, just jump in, do?
I guess I'll segue. Like, if you're like, well, I like just get started with what, I'd say try the building blocks. So try looking at those value areas, re-looking at your processes, people, process, tech. What can you do about your digital core, and what can you do about your talent, and just bite size, break them off.
I think to Lauren's point too, the other place I'd get started on those building blocks where we've started a lot is like pick a data set you're confident with, right? And start to think about what are the ways that this data set can come to life with agentic capabilities for the personas that use it the most. Like that's another really valuable place to get started.
I love that. There's that, that saying, I think it's technically how do you eat an elephant, but I don't like thinking about eating an elephant. So we're gonna like, how do you eat a monster? One bite at a time. You got to start somewhere. We got to change that saying because I
don't like chocolate cake. How do you eat that?
Yeah. How do you eat a bowl of ice cream?
A 5-tier chocolate cake. Yeah. Why does it? Much better metaphor. Yeah, it's one bite at a time. Okay, I'm going to bring it around to our shots called. So what I'm going to do is ask you guys to reflect on the shot you called. Lauren, we had sort of the like thinking broadly, owning your new, getting into that true self. I love that. Very existential, very cool. And then Kirsten, we have the progress over perfection. We're in the new era of learning. How do you guys each think you did? Do you think that the audience, feel free to give us some thumbs up emojis in the chat if you agree. Are we letting everyone walk away here? Did we hit that goal, or have we accomplished what we wanted to do? Kirsten, what do you think?
Maybe other than sounding too much like generative AI, because I use progress over perfection about 10 times in this, but I think we try to hit it home a little bit. Again, and not to sound trite with the tasks that we're up against with compliance and regulatory and everything else in this industry. But I think for too long, and a lot of our customers have admitted this, like we've used that as a reason to not do things. And I think the opportunity cost is too high. And I think Lauren and I hit that pretty hard.
Yeah. Lauren, what do you think?
I mean, I hope so. I feel like I also said my buzzwords ad nauseum today. So
you're playing bingo out there. Let us know what you want. So
we're going to bring you guys back for another webinar, and everyone out there today, come ready with your bingo scorecard. We'll all play together. For me personally, I think that we've hit those, I think you guys called your shots really well. I think one of the things that I know we all wanted to do was sort of get into those tangible steps. I think that we've talked about the really important things here, which are mindset and building blocks. I think if anyone's feeling overwhelmed or behind, things are moving so quickly right now that you're really not alone in that. We're talking about building blocks that got reinvented 5 minutes ago. So the most important thing I think is what I'm taking away is keeping that learning mindset, keeping agile, keeping, trying things and taking small steps to reach that big impact. And that's what's really standing out for me from what I've heard from you guys. I do want to say for folks, a couple of things, getting back to our wonderful folks in the audience, you've all asked some incredible questions. We have no time to get into these questions today. It's my fault. I asked a lot of questions of Lauren and Kirsten because there were so many interesting things to dig into. So we've been trying to answer as many as we could on live chat. Hopefully you've gotten some answers already on live chat. Anything we don't get to on live chat today, we are going to follow up in email. So stay tuned for that. Lauren and Kirsten would love to hear from you. The teams would love to hear from you. So there's still time to get a question in. If it's rattling around your brain, make sure you get it in right now, and we will get that answer back to you after we wrap. The other thing I want to call out is these guys are not willing to brag about themselves enough, clearly, but we have some awesome literature coming out, a novel. No, we'll lower our expectations.
We don't have our book deals signed yet.
We have a really wonderful follow-up coming from both Kirsten and Lauren here that is basically going to be sort of the written form of this wonderful masterclass that we just took. And I think that's a great thing. And I appreciate you guys doing that. You're going to email that to everyone that's attended here today. And for somebody, you take in all this wonderful information, your brain is just lit up and full of exciting insight. And then you walk away and you're like, I'm going to remember everything. And somebody asks you a question and you lose 10%. And so what's great about this follow-up is you're going to get to re-jog your memory and kind of relive this experience. Plus you can watch this webinar again on demand with your handout and have a 1-2 punch. How great is that?
With your bingo card.
That's it.
Yeah, bingo card, exactly.
With your bingo card next to you. That's important. All right, well, Lauren and Kirsten, thank you so much for being here with us today. I have truly loved this conversation. I know our audience has loved being a part of it, and I hope we'll get to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Oh man, what a wonderful, wonderful day. And I want to stop for a second and call out all the high fives and thank yous that I'm seeing in the chat as well. You guys have all just absolutely brought the positivity today. Between the questions you're asking and the really lively chat, it has been so much fun going through this. And Lauren and Kirsten were, every time the camera feed switched away from them, they were furiously answering questions on live chat as we chatted about. And it's just wonderful that we all get to be a part of that kind of interactive conversation, because as we keep saying, as things move so rapidly, this really is how we stay on top of it, stay in front of it, stay interactive and a part of that innovation, rather than being sort of sideswiped by it, because we're all actively participating in these conversations about it. So that's a big gold star to all of you. You know, there was something I also just thought of, I should probably mention. I did see quite a few questions coming in that were sort of specific cases. My organization needs this. I live in this country where we have these types of compliance concerns. And I wanted to mention, Kirsten and Lauren had messaged me that they were going to be answering some of those questions in follow-up. So there are going to be more details coming in email. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to some of these topics for organizations, and so stay tuned for those very specific follow-ups. Jamie, so glad you enjoyed the discussion. I did as well, and I'm glad seeing all of those wonderful shout-outs coming in from you all. Okay, a few final things. I was mentioning the Docs tab. I'm going to shout it out one more time. Make sure you spend some time in the Docs tab. There's some great resources. You've got the Partner Resource Center. You can really get into, you know, I love that title, Reinvent Your Competitive Edge with Salesforce and Accenture. This is the time to do that. Yeah, again, as we said, instead of being sideswiped by all of this change, get out in front of it and make that your competitive edge. There's a report you can download, Learning Reinvented, Accelerating Human AI Collaboration. That was a big theme in our conversation today, so make sure you've got that. A great perspective paper on what it will really take for pharma to reinvent customer engagement. This, again, following up, expanding on what we chatted about today. And of course, that Wharton report, the skills mismatch economy, insights from the Wharton Accenture Skills Index. Make sure you've got that. Hold on to that. That's going to be important for you as a professional, as a human. Some really great insight there. So lots of ways to follow up. I do also want to call out the fact that Riley is going to open up a survey. We would love to hear from you. We just want to make sure we're hitting you with the right information, the right time, in the way that works for you. So take a second and fill that survey out if you've got the time. While you're doing that, how about I'll trade you? If you guys are all heading over to fill out the survey, I will give away a prize. We have a $250 Amazon gift card that we are going to give away to one person who is here live, present, and a little bit lucky here with us today and meeting all of those wonderful Smart Brief terms and conditions that I'm sure everyone's got memorized. But if you don't, again, in the Docs tab. All right, so our special winner here today is Austin Cottle of North Carolina. Austin Cottle of North Carolina. Congratulations to you, Austin. Now we will follow up with you after we wrap. And unfortunately, that is now. We are going to bring things to a close. So I have to bring a big thank you on behalf of the Smart Brief team to Salesforce and to Accenture for making this webinar possible, especially to our speakers here with us today, to Kirsten and Lauren. You have both given us so much to think about. You've brought a lot of insight. You've brought a lot of dynamicism, passion and engagement, a lot of life to concepts that I think maybe can sometimes feel like they're just things you're reading about or things that you're trying to get your head around, and it can feel hard to jump in to eat that chocolate cake. And today you've given us some real action steps. You've really brought this to the ground level where we can all get interactive and take those steps forward. So thank you to Kirsten and Lauren for that. And as I said, my biggest gold star, my biggest thank you goes to all of you here with us today for bringing those questions, bringing that engagement and interactivity that really is what makes these webinars sparkle. And thank you so much for coming to be a part of that. Well, we're going to let you all go on back about your days. I hope everybody's warm and cozy and tucked inside. Great day to be inside hanging out at a webinar. I hope that we'll get to see you all again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.